when Dorsey left and Elon Musk took over that there would be a step in the right direction. It's gotten worse.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
He's an extreme libertarian. He doesn't believe in any kind of government intervention. They want the internet to be the Wild West, where there are no laws, no consequences. You can do whatever you want. Victims have no recourse. And that's what they've got right now.
Thanks for checking out Culture Proof. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And today we are going to be talking a little bit about child exploitation or sexual exploitation online and via platforms. And so I want to give just a little bit of a disclaimer because of the nature of what we're going to be talking about in this episode. It may not be suitable for some listeners. So I want to caution parents, if you listen to our podcast with your kids, we appreciate that. And so we want to respect you by saying, maybe listen to this one first and then decide if you want to listen with your kids, just because we want to have an honest conversation and some of this may not be suitable for young ears. Also, we want to say thank you so much to BJU Press Homeschool. Yes. BJU Press Homeschool is the premier sponsor of the Culture Proof podcast. We couldn't do podcasts like this if we didn't have their support. All right, now we're going to welcome Benjamin Bull, who is the legal counsel for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. And he joins us. He's been a guest of ours before. We've talked about some of these social media platforms and some of these apps that our kids have right on their cell phones, and they are sexually exploiting them, exposing them to content that we would be embarrassed to know that they are privy to. And then also some of our kids becoming victims of sexual exploitation in ways that we couldn't even imagine. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This is an important topic, and I think people need to know what's happening out there for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's a national conversation right now where people are kind of, checking the web to see who was connected to Sean Diddy Combs at what age and what this might mean for, how they may have been exploited as young children. I know that Justin Bieber is one of those as well as others, but you guys have been looking into the exploitation of children for a long time and warning parents and warning companies and holding their feet to the fire about what it means to protect children. Talk about where your organization is now, not only in light of what the current events are, but just kind of your longstanding position on the need to protect children.
Well, that's a broad question, and let me just say this to your audience: if your kids are on the internet, it's not a question of if; it's just a question of when they'll be approached by groomers, sex traffickers, people with bad intent. It doesn't have to be somebody who's famous like Diddy Combs. It could be somebody pretending to be somebody else. It could be children are lonely, especially coming out of COVID. We know what, we all know what it was like in junior high school, how cruel kids can be, but people can find friends, and there are people on the internet that are so manipulative. They're so good at what they do that they can sell bark off a tree. And they can lure these kids into bad relationships, doing bad things, and the kids don't know anything any better. And the parents are generally clueless, even though they've done everything right. They've done everything right. And so our organization focuses on stopping sexual exploitation wherever it arises. I'm basically the leader of a public interest law firm embedded within NCOSE. So our lawyers sue online sex traffickers, companies like X, formerly Twitter, companies like MindGeek, Pornhub, X-Hamster, X-Videos, companies which are currently sex trafficking children and women, monetizing or profiting from images women are forced to do, or children, or pictures of children. Anytime child pornography is made, we call it CSAM. Child pornography is taken and uploaded to the internet and monetized. That's sex trafficking under federal law. Anytime a woman is forced to make a video or make a picture of herself engaging in sexually explicit activity through force, fraud, or coercion, and it could be a pimp, it could be somebody saying, look, you're hungry, I will feed you if you do this. Or if you don't do this, I'm going to beat your children or beat you or beat your sister. And you do it. And that's uploaded to the internet and monetized. And it could be on X, it could be on TikTok, could be on Pornhub. That is a violation of federal law. That's sex trafficking under federal law. Right now, the Department of Justice, regrettably, is doing little or nothing to enforce that law. So it's left to private law firms like ours, and we work with about a dozen other we're very good plaintiffs law firms to represent victims of this kind of sex trafficking in court, sometimes state court, sometimes federal court, to effectuate some degree of justice, to get injunctions and get monetary damages to bring a degree of justice and wholeness to these victims.
Wow. So these platforms that you mentioned, they have to know what's being uploaded, right, to their platforms. What responsibility do they have in all of this?
They have 100% responsibility, and they do know. They pretend they don't know. They pretend they don't know. Let me give you an example. We represent two 13-year-old boys that were groomed by a pedophile online. The pedophile pretended to be a 16-year-old girl, started sending the boys explicit images of herself. The boys sent images back of themselves. It got very explicit. The girl turned out to be a 45-year-old pedophile, not a 16-year-old girl at all. The pedophile posted all of the images, including videotapes, on Twitter. It's become X now. Twitter monetized it. The mother and the children contacted Twitter, told Twitter, look, these images have been uploaded. Take a look at them. They're clearly child pornography. Pull them down right away. The kids were 13 years old, and they look 13. Twitter wrote back, said, we have looked at the images. They do not violate our policy. We will not be taking them down.
Wow.
And the mother said, what are you talking about? Did you even look at them? And finally, through family friends, they got the Department of Homeland Security to contact Twitter, law enforcement agency, and then finally Twitter pulled them down. But in a period of 7 or 8 days, there were hundreds of thousands of views, tweets, and hundreds of downloads. What that means is once they're downloaded, they can be re-uploaded. And those boys' images will be on the internet forever.
Wow.
So we have Twitter caught red-handed. And based upon our own research, we know as a matter of fact that there are hundreds of thousands of child porn images that are bought, sold, and traded on Twitter or X every single day. Twitter knows about it, and they say they have a zero tolerance policy. That's all words and no action. They will take some steps to remove or delete some of these images, but they basically month after month after month, year after year, only delete 1/3 of the images that they know or there are reports that they're child pornography. So some months, 31% they'll pull down, some months 37%, 35, 33, but it's always no more than 1/3. It's fascinating. But they know about it and they allow it. And, we thought when Dorsey left and Elon Musk took over that there would be a step in the right direction. It's gotten worse.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
He's an extreme libertarian. He doesn't believe in any kind of government intervention. They want the internet to be the Wild West, where there are no laws, no consequences. You can do whatever you want. Victims have no recourse. And that's what they've got right now.
Wow.
Well, that kind of brings me to Telegram. That is not a platform that I'm familiar with. It's not a platform that I use, but I would imagine, based on what I have learned, that Telegram would kind of be that wild west where they kind of boast in not having any back doors to any kind of government entities, that they are not owned by anyone. People can trust that they can communicate whatever they want and, have that remain private. And to some people, that sounds like that is, really sticking it to the government. Like, yeah, that's what we want. We want our privacy. But I would imagine that your organization would feel otherwise, that no, this is harmful and that children are being harmed. Talk about, if you feel comfortable, Pavel Durov's kind of, philosophy and the result of that philosophy and the harm that I guess children and women experience via Telegram.
Well, first, you have to remember that Pavel Durov is a Russian oligarch. He's been friends with Putin for a long time. He's got 5 different nationalities. That means 5 different passports. And I think he does that so that if one gets yanked, he can still have 4 more. But his platform is totally encrypted end to end. He refuses to cooperate with any law enforcement agencies or any governmental agencies at all. So imagine a kitchen where the police turn the the light on, where do the cockroaches go? They go into the dark. That's what's happened here. Telegram is the dark. This is where pedophiles go to sell porn and child pornography. This is where illegal arms dealers go to do deals. This is where all sorts of criminal activity happens, sex trafficking. It's because it's in the dark. They know they won't get caught. There's huge amounts of money. Now, this individual, Durov, has made literally billions of dollars, not just over the course of his long career, but in the last 3 years, because of the amount of money that he gets from protecting these outlaws. And so, if you don't want to be caught, and you're doing something vastly illegal, money laundering, extortion, killing for hire, whatever you want, you can do it on Telegram. Advertise your services, get a buyer, strike a deal, and the Department of Justice in the United States will never find out about it. Finally, one government, the French government, has stepped up and they placed him under arrest. And they're we'll see what happens, but they're trying to strike a deal to at least allow their government, their law enforcement, to have access to him. But this is the primary means that Russia, for example, right now is communicating to its frontline soldiers. In other words, because it's encrypted end to end, it's the only way that Moscow can communicate with its officers and generals and soldiers fighting in Ukraine. And so there's that aspect too. So if you don't like what Russia's doing in Ukraine, well, that's being made possible by this fellow Durov and Telegram, because he won't allow anybody else to have access to what's transpiring on his platform, and that includes sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. I'm not talking about hundreds of people. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of women, many of whom I mentioned Ukraine are coming out of Ukraine. These young girls, 14, 15, 16, have nothing except the clothes on their back. And they're told that they can make money by a few short hours and posing for pictures, taking pictures, doing videos. And before they know it, they're drugged. They're held captive against their will someplace, and they're used until they basically die or they're thrown out. And, we have a lawsuit going on right now against two brothers in Bucharest, Romania, called Andrew and Tristan Tate, the Tate brothers. You may have heard of them. Notorious sex traffickers. An indictment has just come down in Romania against them for trafficking 37 separate young girls, including children, many of whom were desperately seeking help out of Ukraine, who had nothing. They were caught by these beasts. And these are the kinds of people that use Telegram in order to sell their pictures, to do their images, and to carry out their activity successfully away from law enforcement.
Man, I mean, Benjamin, it's incredible to think about. And I think probably because many of us don't think about it, it's difficult for us to conceptualize the type of evil that is in the world. We know that there is evil in the world, but I'm wondering about this tension, and I don't want to bring you into a conversation that you're not comfortable having. I understand what your scope is. I understand what your organization does, but there is a tension where I think there are so many Americans who would hear the conversation of, protecting innocent people. We look at what's flooding into our border, right? Like we look at the children who are being exploited as they are trafficked across our borders. Like we understand that, and we are outraged by that. But then there's this piece of, okay, there's a growing distrust of the government. We don't want people able to spy on us and then use information that they have against us, however they choose to use that information. And so I think there is a tension where people are like, no, we don't want to see people sexually exploited, but there are champions of Telegram. There are those who, they love Elon Musk. They love that he is saying, no, we're going to protect free speech. And that means all speech and all presentations. How do we navigate that tension in a way that both protects individuals and also protects what we value as a country? I'm just thinking about us here in the United States of America.
Well, I don't think it's a question of too much government. I think it's a question of too much bad government.
Mm.
You know, I'm of the view that the smaller the government, the less intrusion into our personal lives, the better.
Yeah.
The problem is that government is getting bigger and bigger and doing worse and worse things. And it's not, in other words, the bigger it gets, the less it seems to solve the current problems that are facing us today. Elon Musk can have his cake and eat it too. He can have a robust website where there's a free exchange of information. All he has to do is basically adopt a certain software that would identify child pornography on his platform and eliminate that problem tomorrow. He could do it in one fell swoop. Why he doesn't do it, I don't know. I know there's a lot of money associated with it. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's, sort of the camel's nose in the tent. Once he starts regulating certain kinds of images, there'll be other cries to crack down on more. I don't know. But no, I don't have anything personally against Elon Musk or anybody like that. I love the fact that he's bold and he's pro free speech, but along with free speech comes responsibility. Free speech is not a suicide pact. It's not an agreement that we can get into a car and roll over people and crush them.
That's good. Yeah.
Right. Because we can have free speech, but we're talking criminal activity.
Right.
And so when you're talking Elon Musk, I mean, he's creating spaceships and stuff, I'm sure he can have something to stop this criminal activity on this platform.
Free speech, but if today, let's say on this conversation, we plan to rob a bank in your local community, and I'll meet you there. I'll bring my AR-47, my gun and everything, and we're going to go in and take our money. That's called conspiracy to commit a crime. Yeah.
For the record, we are not in with Benjamin on that. Just for the record, we do not agree to that. Okay, but go ahead. Continue.
I'm giving you a bad example. It's not unlimited.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I feel like, can you imagine the clips that get taken from that? So the Addisons and Benjamin Bull are going.
You have my permission to redact that from your podcast.
No, it's good. I was interested as I look at what's going on in the headlines. Recently, there was a story on Good Morning America of a young man who, at the age of 12, befriended someone online through a gaming app. And, he thought this person was 19 years old. They began a friendship, and then they began messaging through iMessage, which is Apple's messaging device, which, my goodness, it just bypasses all of the safeguards. And this 12-year-old, 13-year-old was then exposed to pornography. He began to distance himself from his parents. He got into self-harm, and all of these things happening right under his parents' roof. They had no idea. And I think this is where you guys are. You are saying there must be safeguards in place, that you are calling on companies like Apple and apps like Telegram and others, Snapchat. And maybe this is a great time for us to kind of roll into your dirty dozen as you look at these apps and these companies that do not have safeguards in place. Because I agree with you, Benjamin. I think, yes, we want freedom, but we don't want, and I, as a Christian, I would use a biblical reference. We don't want to use our freedoms as a cover up for sin. But I would imagine that the reason you guys are after some of these companies is because that's precisely what they're doing.
Well, there's incredible cynicism. Their public relations arm, which are in these companies like Apple, for example, they invest hundreds of millions of dollars in branding and in image shaping and so on. And they will say they have zero tolerance policy, the kind of situation that you just described, that the boy that happened to this young man who was 12 years old, they say, well, that's impossible. We have policies and procedures in place that would prevent that from happening. They don't enforce these policies. They don't prevent these things from happening. And I wish, maybe I'm becoming a terrible cynic, but I don't believe a thing they say anymore. And we meet with all of them. We've met with Apple. We meet with we try to talk to Telegram. They don't talk back. But we meet with Google. We've met with TikTok. We meet with all of these online platforms. And when we meet with them in the boardrooms, they'll say exactly the right thing. They'll tickle our ears. Don't worry, we've got it under control. We're shocked this happened. You know what? It keeps happening. And we have these meetings year after year after year, and the same people are hauled before Congress every year. It's like some Japanese kabuki dance, where you get the owner of Instagram and Meta, then you get the Elon Musk and the others, Zuckerberg, and they say, we can do better. We have to do better. We're sorry for what happened. And then a year later, they're brought back and nothing's gotten better.
Yeah.
It goes on and on and on. So we need some federal legislation. Again, I have libertarian instincts. I think smaller government's better than large government as well, but you need to have effective government. There's a bill in Congress called COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, that's being held up in the House by libertarian Republican leadership. It passed the Senate by a vote of 92-3. There are a couple of abstentions. It basically would impose a duty of care to online platforms like X, Meta, TikTok, all Apple, Google, everybody. And it would require them not to use algorithms to lure children into hypnotizing children into bad behavior. It's like, again, the people that are using algorithms and certain advertisements, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what to say and what images to present to hook these children, to keep them on the internet as long as possible. And these aren't people like you and me. These are professionals. They're geniuses at this kind of thing. And this would prevent that kind of manipulation, that algorithms would not be used in connection with children that are 15 and younger. It would also require these platforms to meet a certain standard of duty of care in connection with injuring children, and also be transparent. Once a year, they'd have to publicly reveal what steps they're taking, what model they're using in order to protect children. And if they're not doing anything at all, that'll come out. But if they're doing a great job, that'll come out as well. They should get kudos and praise for that. But it's being held up by Representative Scalise in the House. He says he wants to see who wins the election in November before he'll decide whether or not to release it to a vote. This is a bill that passed the Senate with bipartisan support, 92-3, that a handful of extremist libertarians, God bless them, are holding it up because they get huge amounts of money from big tech. Scalise, for example, an article was published in Bloomberg just yesterday afternoon. He is the highest grossing recipient of big tech donations of anybody in Congress.
Wow.
And he's the one who is holding it up because Apple, TikTok, Google, X, they're all whispering in his ear and giving him money. His several of his former direct aides, the highest people in his office, have just taken partnership jobs with huge K Street lobbying firms representing big tech. The whole thing is corrupt. There was a great article in Bloomberg yesterday written by a gal named Emily Birnbaum. If your listeners or observers or audience are interested, that's in Bloomberg. Read it, because it really outs what's going on right now. This is terrific. This is great legislation, COSA, that would go a long way to protecting children, to stopping the kinds of things we're talking about here. But it's being held up. He won't even allow a vote to happen because he knows it would pass. Right?
Wow.
So it to the floor.
It's sad to me that in this country, like when you just gave me that background information about the financial connection, that doesn't surprise me. And it's sad that so many of us, and I don't know, maybe jaded is the right word, but we expect that. We expect that whenever there is an opportunity to do right and it isn't taken, that there's usually some sort of, there's a financial underpinning there. There's a vested interest that these entities have, or that the people who are kind of holding back, there's a reason that they're doing that. And that's sad, but I think that's something that we in this country have just kind of gotten used to. Here's what I want to do though, because we've mentioned Telegram, but I know you guys have your list. You have your list of apps and programming and things like that you warn parents about, that you are warning individuals about. What's your metric there? How do you determine that a company or an app or a platform, social media platform, should make your dirty dozen? Like what is it that they're doing? Because I would imagine that there is something about each of them, but what makes them like the dirtiest?
Yeah, we have a terrific research department that keeps track of policies, rules, regulations, internal rules in these companies, whether they're enforced, whether they're not. Remember, we get hundreds of complaints and people reach out to us. And so we take those complaints seriously. We track them down. We see which company is generating the most complaints. We take a look to see, what their policies are. And the fact is that the Dirty Dozen list, that the companies on that list don't come as a surprise. They're the ones you read about. They're sort of the Diddy Combs of the internet world, most of them. And yet, I mean, we'll see incremental improvement over time, like Google has incrementally improved, but it's sort of an inch at a time. And you're trying to get miles down the road, and you want to praise them for moving a couple of inches, but they need to revamp the entire operation to stop the kind of sexual exploitation, the kinds of things that happened to this 12-year-old boy who got into pornography, he was groomed, and all these bad things.
What are some of the companies or the apps or platforms that are on your list right now that parents, that our listeners should be aware of?
Well, I would encourage everybody to go to the NCOSE website, National Center on Sexual Exploitation. If you just put in those words in Google, it'll come up. But at the top of our list is Instagram, obviously, TikTok, Google, X, OnlyFans. I wish I had the whole list in front of me, but I would.
Fine.
They're at the top of the list. But and you'll see if you go on the website, we do our homework. There are in-depth reports on what these companies are doing, what their policies are, why they fall short, and we don't want to get sued for defamation from these companies. So we support everything we say. You'll see lots of footnotes. We can support everything. Again, that when we out these people, when we call them to account, when we shine the bright light of scrutiny on them, it's all valid. Take a look at the website, National Center on Sexual Exploitation, or NCOSE, NCOSE. It'll pop up.
This really highlights the responsibility of parents. We're talking about what your organization does, but it can't get away from parents have to know and understand what's going on and how to protect their children and not be afraid, to stand in between these platforms and these things that their kids may have and say, hey, let me see what you're watching. Let me know what's going on. It just really highlights the role of parents.
Yeah, Benjamin, thank you so much. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I appreciate the awareness that you've allowed us to have the opportunity just to bring to our audience. I think one of the great, and to the point that you just made, Will the Great, I think one of the great deceptions is that parents think, well, we've got these mechanisms in place, or that these platforms have these safety features in place. And a lot of parents kind of comfort themselves with the hope that that's enough. And what we're finding is that it's not enough. Benjamin, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
My honor. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. God bless you.
God bless you both.
Man, it's crazy to me to think that there are so many companies that have access to children and that don't mean them well. And our children are becoming victims increasingly of these apps, of these companies. So we want to be vigilant in all of that. Make sure you check out the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. You can just do a Google search and visit their website and get access to that Dirty Dozen list that they have. Some of it may shock you. Some of it you may have already suspected. We want to stand against what's happening in the culture. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth, we remain culture proof. Until next time, Lord willing.
God bless.